And then I will go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everybody to our Mid-Atlantic Logger Training webinar. This is the April edition of our series. So if you missed the first couple of months, you might want to look those up. But we're glad to have you here today. We've got, I think, a really good program. Our topic for tonight is current logging issues in your state. We have representatives here, leaders in the logging and forestry sector from Maryland, Ohio, Virginia, and West Virginia. We're going to have a panel discussion. So it should be a good program tonight. I'm Karen Snape. I'm with Virginia Cooperative Extension, and I manage the SHARP Logger program, which is our logger training program. I just want to let you know that the session is being recorded. It will be made available for credit for watching the recording. So if you have some buddies that aren't here tonight that might take advantage of that, let them know about it. All of our participants right now, which is people that aren't on the panel, are muted, and your video is also off. So you don't have to worry about, any kind of crying babies or barking dogs or anything on your end. But we do welcome your interaction, welcome you to ask questions of our panelists here. You can do that by using the Q&A, which is the double cartoon talking bubble. You can type questions in there. You can also use the chat, which is the single cartoon talk bubble. And if you would prefer to ask your questions out loud, you can use the raise hand icon, which very cleverly looks like a hand. And that we can use that to turn on your microphone so that you can speak. We actually just enable your microphone. There's still a step where you turn it on. And that way you can communicate with us. And we really especially welcome that at the end of the prepared presentation. So tonight's session, as all of our sessions, is worth 1 continuing education credit in whichever state you are collecting credits in. So within about a week, if I do everything right on my end and Ben does everything right on his end, in about a week, you should get a certificate. But Ben will also, my counterpart in West Virginia, Ben, who does most of our tech stuff, will also send that information directly to the coordinator of your state program, who will be able to enter that for you. But the certificate is yours as a backup in case anything, goes wrong. You have to say later in life that you took it. So let's see here. We've already, like I said, we've already had a couple months so far this year. We have 2 more coming up. So next month, we'll be talking about the business side of logging, which is something I'm interested in learning a little bit more. And then in June, we will be talking about invasive plants. So I think those are going to be some good programs coming up. Come on back if you are interested in the topics or need the credits. So does anybody have any questions tonight about any of that housekeeping stuff, how anything's going to work? See something in the chat. It's just Agnes saying hello. So I'm going to take it that we don't have any questions about how things work. We'll have questions for our panelists later. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists. So we have Joe Hinson. He is with the Maryland Forestry Association. Frank Myers with the Virginia Loggers Association, Ryan Redity and Jenna Reese with the Ohio Logger Council, Eric Carlson with the West Virginia Forestry Association, and Bill Robinson with the West Virginia Loggers Association. I might have gotten that a little bit wrong, but those are the states that they're from, which is really what's the important part to you all. So, glad to have you there. I see your hello in the chat, Jason. Good to have you here. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing these guys because I'd use up the whole time introducing 6 people. So we're just going to go ahead and move on with our panel discussion. So setting up a few more things on my screen so that I can keep track of everything while we do that. All right, great to see a handful of attendees here. That's wonderful. So I'm going to be, like I said, kind of facilitating the panel discussion. And our first question is, what is the top few issues that are facing loggers in your state? And we're each going to maybe take a turn talking about the issues facing loggers in our state. Does anybody want to go first? Oops. All right, then, Frank, how about you go first?
I will go first. I was going to tell you I'd go first. First,
That's wonderful.
thank you for letting me sit in for Ron. As I told y'all earlier, he's on to trying to do good work for the loggers in Virginia tonight. So hopefully he'll have good luck. You know, when you start talking about the issues that we have going on in our whole industry right now, obviously, you know, everybody wants to start with fuel, and it's really huge to all of us. My accountant was in our office today, and you know, our trucking company is just a bloodbath. I mean, I've never seen anything to beat it, and you know, that's bad enough for one thing, but what really gets us is, you know, you have the fuel costs, then you have the cost of all our parts have gone through the roof. Our labor costs are through the roof. You know, the availability of parts, the availability of equipment, the availability of trucks, and it all comes around to fuel and labor. And, you know, all those are terrible issues for us to try to deal with. But in Virginia, we're really kind of unique, especially in southeastern Virginia. We're a pine, you know, we grow pine. That's pretty much what we do. And, you know, we've lost all our markets. We lost our markets in 2008 when the housing crash came about. And in Virginia, we've done such a good job of growing pine trees that it's really hit us hard in the logging industry. We've basically been on a saw timber quota nonstop since 2008. And when you put that with the cost of fuel, I mean, we don't have any margins left. And from a supply and demand balance, you know, it's so out of whack that we don't have any leverage against any of these mills. And so therefore, you know, our rates are just extremely low right now. And it's been a double whammy for us here. And I had one of our members tell me yesterday that the loggers in his area were dropping like flies. And it's really a sad thing to sit here and watch. I mean, you know, we've got this great resource. We've done such a really good job growing it. And then, then we're faced with this. So I'm not going to take all the things, you know, I can go labor and I can go insurance, but I'm sure somebody else wants something to talk about. So I'll take the easy one and I'll blame fuel. Okay.
All right. How about Ryan? Would you mind going next?
Well, I think kind of like what Frank was saying. Obviously, everyone, not even just in this panel, but in the whole country, feeling the pain from the fuel and labor shortages and things like that. In Ohio, kind of specific to us, I guess. A couple different things, you know. One thing we've run into, just thinking about things that guys have came to me with here recently, we've had issues where townships and counties in our state handle weight limits and such in different ways. And one county allows trucks to kind of get by with running on like a legal state way, and other counties they'll have restrictions on their roads and they enforce it sometimes they don't enforce it. And it makes it hard for guys when they're buying timber. You know, they don't know until they get in the particular issue that one of our loggers is dealing with now. He's on a township road and the roads was in great disrepair back toward the end where the property was that he's working on. And so he poured a lot of money into it and gravelled it and made it where it was accessible for his trucks. But then on the front end of the road, where it was chip and sealed, there was some damage, you know, that they're blaming on him. And now they're expecting him to pay for the chip and seal. But there's no statute, no precedent set for what that township can actually do. And so he's struggling with that. And that's a big issue in Ohio. I don't know if it's something that other states deal with or not. And then I think Jenna was going to talk a little bit about we have a couple different tax laws for forest landowners in Ohio. You know, we have a forest tax law and we have what's called CAUV, and there's some differences there that affects whether or not really they're encouraging those landowners to manage their timber and do harvest. So Jenna, if you want to jump on that.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So I would say that, building on some of the uniqueness that Ryan was talking about with the road issue, Ohio is a home rule state. And so there's not much that we can do at the state level to dictate how municipalities govern themselves. And so, we do have a lot of situations where it seems to be some unequal application of the law, where a gravel truck doesn't get pulled over, but a log truck does. So that's been a not fun world to navigate, and don't really have an answer in sight yet. But because we have that lovely little home rule provision, they can do it, and there's not much that we can do, but we'll still be working on that. Like he said, we also have some confusion with, we have two competing tax law programs that on the landowner side tend to confuse folks, but also can create challenges for loggers, combined with the fact that Ohio possibly might be the only one in this group is a voluntary certification state. So we don't have any licensing requirements for loggers or certification requirements. So, to be in one of these tax programs, harvest has to happen under a master logger. But part of that process requires the landowner to be informed of all of the master loggers in their area. So I have had feedback saying, I've spent all this money advertising, and this landowner has reached out to me, but now they're going to get a whole list of loggers in the area that now I'm competing with, and likely will lose that cut. So that's one challenge. And then another is, because it's voluntary, we have a hard time incentivizing it equally in all areas of the state to be part of our master logger program. We have a lot of big companies like AEP that require master loggers to work on their sites, but those companies aren't necessarily located all throughout the state. So if you're in one of those areas that doesn't have a company that requires master logger programs, then it can be a disincentive, and you can lose to, loggers who are not going through the proper trainings and not taking days off or evenings off to do training like this. So it can create quite a problem. And I would say the last one that maybe doesn't come up as much, and I'm curious to know if it's an issue in other states as well, is the weather. So we are in a La Nina pattern, and I'm going to get way out of my depth real fast. But according to our state climate specialist at Ohio State Extension, that is when the sea temperatures in South America are cooler than average, and that amplifies the jet stream over the Ohio Valley area and almost always produces wet weather. So we have had very wet April, Mays, and Junes, making it very difficult for a lot of our folks to get out there and work. But then we also have dry, almost drought-like conditions coming through July, August, and September. So these are long-term trends that we're seeing for the weather in Ohio that all of the agricultural industry has had to adapt to. And I think our loggers are going to have to do the same because we don't see this changing, and that could absolutely impact when they're able to get out and harvest timber. We've taken up a lot of time. So anyone else want to jump in?
No, that's wonderful. I was going to invite maybe West Virginia. So I will switch my spotlights over. So maybe we can hear from West Virginia next. I think that was great to hear about some of those differences.
I'm gonna I'll let Bill Robinson lead it off. He goes out there every day and cuts trees and hauls them to the mill. So
I think as Jenna was talking there's two things we can't control: the weather and the soil texture. And that's what really makes it tough for the logging industry. One of our biggest problems here in this state right now is the shortage of loggers, and they're just having a problem with people getting into the business. We have work. I get calls constantly from mills wanting to know where they can get logging companies and who they can get. There's just nobody out there. The hardwood's a little different from the pine Ron was talking about. Hardwood market's really good right now, and a lot of the mills are good, but the pulpwood companies is in trouble. Poplar Peeler Company, they're in trouble. They're about out. When timber's good, those companies suffer. And when saw logs are not so good, they thrive. Then you end up on a quota. But after Verso shut down there in Luke and the 08 downturn destroyed the logging industry in northeastern West Virginia out in the Panhandle and up towards Monongahela County and all around in our area because everybody delivered there. And a lot of the other mills has picked up some of the slack, but we're trucking the wood a lot further. Talked about the diesel fuel prices, insurance. And I went today to get a sensor for my dozer and they got 10 back ordered. Nobody's got them, can't get them. So I got a 658 sitting there that's no value to me. But Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I think just to compliment what some other folks said, I mean, one of the things that is unique to West Virginia is that we do have a licensed logger operation and we have the state forestry department that oversees it. And so that's a positive thing. I think that the challenge always is we have required training. And that's why one of the reasons we enjoy this kind of training online, because to make it more convenient for loggers is really important after hours. They have to take a day off of work to go to training. And so this is really helpful. I think one of the issues that's also unique to us is that we have a real challenge with our workers' compensation in this arena. According to the statistics of our Department of State, 72% of all of our licensed loggers are either sole proprietors or partnerships. At least they claim self-exemption from workers' comp, which means we have an awful lot of loggers out there that don't have much of a safety net for themselves. If they have an injury, they just have to bite the bullet and pay for that. So it's a real challenge. We've tried to look at various options to do that. We also have a unique law here this last year that Bill was involved in trying to deal with. We still have tort reform that hasn't been completed. Virginia's really, we try to pattern our tort reform after Virginia's law that has workers' comp as the sole beneficiary for a workplace injury. We have that provision in West Virginia where not only do you get workers' comp if you do have it, but you can also sue under a particular provision of the statute that was a bench ordered provision back years ago called deliberate intent. In other words, if you put somebody out there in a dangerous occupation, they sue. And unfortunately, our loggers and our mills, and they extend these lawsuits to all the way up to every part of the food chain. So we try to change that this year. We weren't able to do that this year, but that is a continuing nagging issue because it's a cost of doing business for our loggers and our mills. I think that's one of the challenges, as Bill talked about. When things are good, they're great, and we can't find quality employees. We can't find, and we're trying to stand up some training programs at schools, if that's possible, to try to deal with some of these things. So we're not sitting back and just complaining, but we're trying to look at solutions, but those are all longer term solutions. The other thing, and Jenna brought up the issue, and so did Ryan, about truck weights. We've had an on and off love-hate relationship with the State Department of Highways. We actually, in West Virginia, our Public Service Commission actually runs the weight limits on our highways. And they tend to respond to phone calls from citizens and run their scales up. And so I spend too much of my time calling the state to say, why are you picking on loggers instead of picking on the asphalt trucks paving Interstate 79 or 77? Because those are obviously, big politically important projects to fix the highways, and they don't want to slow those projects down. So we've had a problem with our folks being targeted, so to speak. It's easy for anybody that's run a scale alongside of the highway to look at a log truck and know that they're overweight. That's a pretty easy thing to do. But what we're also finding out is a lot of our drivers, we can't find CDL drivers. And the drivers that are being caught, a lot of them have suspended licenses. Some of them aren't even legal drivers. So for me as an association executive to defend somebody operating illegally is very, very challenging. And really the pressure because of the high fuel costs We have not been able, and I've been trying to persuade the state to give us a little leeway on the weight limits, but they just simply won't do it. And unfortunately, we have very poor road systems in our county road system. We do have a statewide system instead of the home rule like Ohio has. I worked in New York State, they had a home rule. Pennsylvania has a home rule. They can do the same thing, change the weight limits on a daily basis if they want to. We don't have that in West Virginia. We have a state-run system, which is good, except our roads are very poor. And so our county roads are limited to 65,000 and the state highways to 80,000, which is a good thing. And they give us a little bit of leeway, but we have some major interstates that could take 250,000 pounds. And we're caught up with that 80,000 pound limit with no leeway on that, on the interstate highways. So I think collectively, we all would benefit from improving that interstate highway system to increase, to at least match our state weight limits with the 10% leeway on your 80,000 pounds would be a huge benefit. A year ago, we addressed it by adding a pup trailer to increase the weight limits to 94,000, but it really doesn't do us any good if most of our highways are stuck with 65,000 plus the 10%. So that continues to be a challenge. I think the last thing I would probably bring up as an important issue that really has been a challenge is just the trying to build the relationships it takes to get other business associations and communities and counties to realize the importance of this industry in the state. And I think that's what we all collectively want. It's important in Virginia, Ohio. We are major employers. We operate in every single county of the state. We provide over $3 billion in Virginia or in West Virginia of economic benefit and jobs, thousands of jobs. We update those economic analysis with third-party verified economic studies, and we continue to struggle to get that kind of recognition. I think that's something that all of us collectively need to work on, because that is a huge challenge. And once we begin to do that, and we've seen it in West Virginia, the coal industry developed a very, very successful support politically. And over the decades, they have special roads with special weight limits, and they have all kinds of little carve-outs to help their industry out. And I think it's a future opportunity for our industry, because as we see the coal industry substantially decline, we are the industry that's going to be in many of these rural counties, and we're the ones that can provide the good paying jobs because the resource is there. We can't move the resource. So that's something that's going to be a challenge for us, but I know it's something that collectively across state lines, we can all work together on.
All right. Thank you very much, West Virginia. And Frank, I see you got your hand up, but I do want to go to Joe, I think, next, because Joe's been very patient here. So we'll move to Joe.
Sure.
Agnes, were you going to speak also, or are you just here for support? I think Agnes is just here for support. We'll just hear from Joe.
I sort of recently moved to Maryland. Well, it's been 10 years now, but I used to be the executive director of the Idaho Timber Industry Association. And here I am in Maryland, and mostly retired, but not very good at being retired. So I do a lot of, I do some consulting work, and I'm the president of the Maryland Forest Association. One of the things that I've observed is Maryland is probably the worst state in the union to have a forest products industry. There's two sections of the state, the far west and the far east, that are significant timber producers. And then there is everybody in the middle, which is everybody. And it's, there's suburbs of Baltimore and DC. And that, of course, is where all the political power lies. And consequently, there's a whole bunch of people in this state that don't have a clue what we do or why or how we do it, as compared to Idaho, where you cannot drive down the street to go to the grocery store without confronting a log truck somewhere along the line. So we've got quite a challenge to sort of improve our political footprint in the state and do some forestry educating. That's important because, as Bill said, one of the big problems we have is a market for low grade hardwood, particularly in Western Maryland. wood energy would seem to be a big part of the solution over there. But there is a deeply ingrained bias in Maryland against any kind of combustion that produces energy or anything else. To the extent that there was a bill in the legislature this year that would have eliminated all renewable energy credits for thermal biomass, which would have taken that off the table. We were successful in defeating that legislation, but it does sort of give you a little bit of insight into the mindset that people in Maryland seem to have. So this year, we're going to dedicate our efforts to education. We plan a series, an aggressive series of legislative and opinion leader tours, one in each section of the state. Over the past year, we've developed some very useful educational material. I'll just hold them up. This is Maryland's Forest, and it addresses questions that we get asked all the time. Do you have to plant trees? What happens if you don't plant trees? Why would you ever clear cut? Things like that. So that's been very useful. And then our larger effort was this. This is called Faces of Forestry, and it is stories about the people that work in forestry in the state of Maryland. Everything from wildlife biologists to loggers to landowners to foresters and everything in between, furniture makers, for example. So we're making some progress in educating, particularly legislators, but that's going to be a continued effort throughout the balance of this year.
Thank you, Joe. Those look like some really great resources.
Yeah, I see Agnes is gonna post the web links. These are all electronic as well.
Oh, great. I was wondering if that was available online. I'd like to look at that.
Yes, I'll get those to you, Karen.
That's great. Thank you. So I know Frank wanted to touch on something. I'm guessing it's truck weight limits. So
It is,
if you're
it
done,
is.
Joe, I'll switch over to Frank. Okay, go ahead, Frank.
All right, and I just, for Eric and Bill and all in Ohio, we just recently went through this process and, we didn't think we were going to get it either, but we did. And we can now, Virginia has their own highways. We have one county that's a little bit of a problem. But other than that, they're all Virginia highways, and we can carry 90,000 pounds now. And what that did for us as loggers, it eliminated that DOT thing that you were talking about a while ago. I mean, they still stop our trucks and they do roadside inspections and everything else, but you pretty much you gotta want to overload a truck to go over 90. I mean, we got 20 on the front axle and 40 on the tandem. So it was a godsend to our trucking business in Virginia for everybody. That being said, it also creates other issues. One, they have started closing bridges down on us. We've had to go to cities and let us go through towns where they have no truck routes and that kind of thing, because the other thing that 90,000 pounds did to Virginia was we can't use our interstate highways now. So, we're hopeful that they're in cooperation with the ALC that we get some things done there over the next few years. But it's a great. The only thing I can tell you is don't ever give up, because a lot of us didn't think, me included, didn't think we'd ever get it. We got it, and it's the best thing that happened to the logging industry in Virginia in a long time. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. I don't know if I don't see anybody else, any of our other panelists raising their hands. So maybe we'll go, maybe we will go to the next question then. So the next question I have is whether anybody has any updates from their state's most recent legislative session. I know we just finished a legislative session here in Virginia. They keep going back. they're done, and then they go back, and then they take a week off, and oh, we just have to go back and finish something. But anyway, I'm assuming that a lot of states run on a similar schedule. So if there's any updates from the legislative sessions, let's see. And we started with Virginia last time. Maybe we'll start with, who wants to go first this time? Maybe West Virginia. We'll start with West Virginia.
Sure, I can go ahead and start with that since I'm the lobbyist for the associations.
Right.
You know, we had a fairly good legislative session. One of, as I mentioned briefly, one of our top priorities was to deal with this tort reform bill. And I will give Bill Robinson, that's on this call, a lot of credit. We had a public hearing on it. We were fighting trial attorneys, and as you can imagine, those are deep-pocketed, multi-million-dollar folks that we were trying to take away a line of business for them. And you know, they're making millions off of these lawsuits. And so we knew we had a big challenge. We got other business associations with us. We had a public hearing. Bill testified at it. Did an incredibly outstanding job. But you know, we were able to do that in a way that was helpful. We did get a bill out of committee. We had chairman sponsor, and we just didn't get over the line at the end of the session the last few days. So we were just a few votes shy. And so we decided, rather than, you know, potentially losing the votes, they pulled the bill at the last minute and said, we're not going to put the votes out there, because they didn't want not to have if you start losing a bill, it's harder sometimes to get it back in again. So it gives us another chance next year to do that. We were very fortunate not to have a lot of other issues affect us. One of the things that came about, and this will have I think a beneficial benefit to our industry, is that, and they had a special session today that passed another $600 million for economic development. And what that's going to do is loans, grants to help industrial development. And in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 companies in the southern part of our state that are going to establish new log yards because the markets are good and they need more wood. And we have a lot of underutilized resource in southern West Virginia. So we're very, this may be an opportunity for some of our companies and the investors in these log yards to really take a look at some state, private, public support, which gains you an awful lot of credibility when you start seeing your picture with the governor and the political leaders of the state building your businesses. So we're hopeful of that. That's going to come to fruition, and some of that money is going to end up in the hands of our industry to be able to build our industry even stronger. So that's a positive thing that came out of this year's legislative session. The other piece of the puzzle is in West Virginia, we're one of the few states in this region that has a registered registered foresters. And our foresters have always, we license our loggers, but there was a provision to get rid of our licensing of foresters. And so that was a provision that we had to stop as well. And you mentioned before, one other thing is that you in Ohio, by your preferential tax program for forest land, we have one in West Virginia. And this is something that's going to affect logging, I think, in the future. West Virginia right now, by my count, has 17 different companies that are out there acquiring forest carbon credits from landowners. And we are, we have taken a look at this. We've got, analysts that have taken a look at it. And as these forest carbon prices go up, and some of these contracts are no harvest contracts, which obviously is not something that we can support per se. The short-term ones don't seem to have a big impact, but the 20-year or 40 years certainly are not ones that we want to encourage. But it is a challenge, and we had our preferential tax program. We had a bill that was going to come out that said if we had any of these forest carbon contracts, that was going to diminish they were going to tax these contracts, they're going to make them public. As much as we have concerns about forest carbon and what might happen in the future of wood supply, depending on how these markets go, having the government interfere with these markets was something we just couldn't support. And the Farm Bureau and myself literally walked the halls, whipped the votes up, and stopped the bill in its tracks after it got out of committee. So, but it didn't make the issue go away. And we continue to have this issue is going to, I think, nag at the industry for the next, I think the next few years, as we see these high technology companies who cannot produce to their public mantra of net carbon. They're going to be out there acquiring carbon credits to rationalize their existence. And we hope that these prices don't get to the point where it's it's more beneficial for a landowner to set aside their trees and let them watch them grow for a while than it is to manage them while they harvest them. I mean, many of our larger timber investment companies, we have a lot of large landowners in West Virginia, particularly in the southern part of the state. About half of our private land is still in large tract ownerships. And many of these owners have already sold a lot of carbon credits. Now, because they have a large tract they're harvesting, but it is an issue we're going to have legislatively in the future. And I just bring that to your attention because it's coming to your state too. So I'll end with that.
That's great. Bill, did you have anything to add?
Add a little something to that. The Forest Service here is they're in the process of expanding what they're going to harvest on the national forest. And they've got a advisory committee, which I'm part of, supposed to start before too long, working with them. They used to do a lot of helicopter work here, and it's went to the wayside. Can't do that anymore. Nobody will do it. And they want to see if they can harvest some of those steeper slopes. And that's what they're looking at. But they're supposed to start selling around 30 million feet a year off of the two national forests that we have. And they can do that from now on, they claim, because the forest is old. And they let it go for so long, selling 3 or 4 million feet a year till it's got way ahead of them. There's going to be a lot of timber for sale in this state. It'll bring the price down some, I'm sure, but I think that's one good thing for our industry. We have a lot of work here. If we can just get some help to do it and figure out some way of bringing on some new companies to help with it. It's just after 08, it's just so hard to get anybody to lend them money in the forest industry. I've talked to a lot of the mills, and my opinion right now is they may have to help out some way, become a sort of a bank.
With the Forest Service properties, they have traditionally pretty strict requirements for environmental protection, and they have all the different ologists looking at everything. And so one of the things that is going to be an issue is trying to figure out ways that we can log some of these steeper ground areas with newer technology or newer systems that, again, have that high price tag potentially with them. Hopefully less than a helicopter, of course, but it's going to require a reinvestment, especially if there's going to be this long-term supply of material.
Wonderful, thank you. I think we'll maybe go to Joe in Maryland next, so he doesn't have to wait to go last this time.
Sure. We had a pretty good legislative session, actually. I mentioned earlier we were able to stop the bill that would have eliminated renewable energy credits for thermal biomass operations. That was good. Sort of an interesting bill that y'all may want to think about, depending upon how each state is set up. We have one commercial firewood producer in Maryland, and he makes about 1 million of those little bundles of firewood that you pay $8 for, or some outrageous price at 7-Eleven. And he ships them all over the country, really.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be careful about shipping firewood across state lines because each state has different requirements based around concern over forest pests. And USDA dropped our certification for emerald ash borer because the bugs won on that, and so they kind of gave that up. We still have USDA certification of the dry kills for gypsy moths, but they're about to back out of that as well. And so we had to go to the legislature and pass a bill that authorized our Department of Natural Resources to certify that dry kill operations are adequate for pest control purposes. And anybody that produces firewood in your state that ships it out may want to take a look at at your whole card if USDA totally backs away from that responsibility. There was also a bill that would have required all state land managing agencies, state forests, wildlife management areas, state parks to identify old growth areas and protect them. The original version of that bill would have extended that to lands that had private lands that had conservation easements on them. So we were successful in substantially modifying that. We got all the easement language out of it. So it certainly is not going to affect private lands. And we amended state forest out of it. They still have to do it on wildlife management areas and state parks, but it's a lot better than what it was. We also got a permanent $1 million appropriation for a fund administered by Department of Natural Resources and dedicated to sort of an open-ended fund, but mostly dedicated to forest management. So I'm sure we'll find useful ways to spend that money in the future. So all in all, we were happy. It was a good session.
Great, thank you, Joe. How about maybe we do Ohio next? All right, love to hear from you guys in Ohio.
Yeah, so Ohio has been blessed, I would say, over the last several years. We have not had to play a lot of defense at the legislature. The Ohio General Assembly pretty much leaves us alone. Obviously, there's been a lot of pandemic assistance dollars and things like that they've been working on. We also have a full-time legislature, so they are always in throughout the biennium, except for they don't have anything scheduled from about mid-March through our May 3rd primary. So they have, we've had rumors of legislation. We haven't really had to have many call to actions. I will say there is a growing concern over, as many people have mentioned, just the education of legislators and the misinformation out there about requiring state properties, et cetera, to not have a commercial cut on their property. And we have had gotten wind of a bill that one legislator is considering to put a 100-year moratorium on cutting in the Mohican State Forest in Ohio. So that will be a problem that we have to address. And, I think that's going to be a broader issue and not one-offs here and there. And we're going to have to do some defense there. I think another issue that will be coming up is, like we've discussed, we are a voluntary certification state, and there are a lot of landowners who have been victims of timber theft who link Ohio having that voluntary system to the timber theft problem. I will say in most of the cases that I've learned about, the licensing structure would not have helped. These are local folks that hear a chainsaw and take advantage of the opportunity. Obviously, the market is wonderful for hardwoods right now, and there are lots of people that are willing to take advantage of that. But I think that's going to be a push that we'll see in the coming years. And based on the political climate, it just takes one loud, angry person and with the ear of their legislator, and we see legislation that may not make a whole lot of sense. But our I would say goal right now is to start laying the groundwork and building the relationships with our legislature, because that's not been something that we've had to do over the last several years, because we've had a pretty favorable position, I would say, with the legislature as a whole.
Yeah, we've been fortunate. We've had, especially in my area, I've had really good relationship with our state reps, state senators, and they're very, we're fortunate right now. Ohio as a whole is very business, pro jobs. And so that's kind of helped us, navigate this without much. But she's touched on two things. And with the timber theft, there's three pretty major timber thefts that have either went to court and been resolved or are in the process. And none of those were master loggers, so to speak. So they weren't people that were part of our voluntary program. but between that and some of we've had some poor jobs being executed as far as BMPs and such that have raised some eyebrows. I had and I won't get into names because I don't want to, I want to stay politically correct, but I had an interesting conversation with a land manager about 2 weeks ago where he had a situation where a logger, he filed an NOI, notice of intent, with the local soil and water district. That's kind of their standard practice. The logger signed it. They didn't go out and see him for a week or two. They go back out to the job. He didn't follow the NOI. He did some things he shouldn't have done based on our best management practices book. And he said when he confronted the logger, it was funny. The logger, his response to him was, "Well, we're not in West Virginia." So, it's kind of like when that logger works a lot in West Virginia, he follows the rules because you quote unquote have to, but he feels like here where we're a voluntary program, I don't have to follow that best management book. It's just it's a suggestion, not a rule, so to speak.
Wonderful, thank you. It's been Frank's turn to be patient, so I'll give Virginia a chance here.
All right. Our legislative session was really pretty quiet too. We haven't even signed the budget yet. So Karen, you might not get paid. Who knows? The only thing that really came out that really affected us completely was a flagging law on a tree length. And that was due to a bad wreck and, a bad situation where the victim was texting and wasn't paying attention, but y'all know how that goes. The log trucks always got to justify that they're not at fault. But anyway, I was very pleased that they came to the Loggers Association and asked for help, and we worked through that. And basically we just adopted federal code. So we just have to have 2 flags on the end now, where by Virginia law you just had to have 1 before. But it was good to work with people, and glad that they came to us. I guess we talked about carbon credits a while ago. I guess the biggest challenge we have in Virginia right now, and it's really tearing the state apart, and even our association, we have different opinions, and that's solar. Solar is really, really huge in Virginia right now. PJM just shut the whole process down. I think last year there's like between 500 and 700,000 acres in a project in the state of Virginia. And, most of that is rural land, which we grow use to either farm or grow timber on. And it's going to have an effect on the Chesapeake Bay. It's going to have an effect on our industries. And, it's really hard. You got personal property rights. People ought to have the right to do to the land with what they want to do with. And then, on the other hand, I'm not sure that solar is that green of an energy. We've had the few projects that are built in Virginia, they're having terrible runoff issues. Or I think this General Assembly just passed something that said that the panels were part of the water runoff part now, and they're trying to change the buffers, they're trying to change the amount of runoff, and kind of like the carbon credits, it's a big thing. And this, our previous governor passed the Virginia Clean Energy Act, and to stop some of this stuff, we're going to have to repeal that act if that's possible. Not sure where this is going to really go, but it's definitely going to have an effect on what you see in Virginia when you ride from one part of it to the other, especially along the North Carolina, Virginia line.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I worked Spotsylvania County, so I'm a little bit familiar with the solar issues. I see that Joe has his hand up, so maybe we'll hear a little bit more about something related in Maryland.
Well, it has to do with Frank's comments on solar. Had a really interesting, I guess it was a conversation, more like a run-in, with a lady from the Nature Conservancy a couple of weeks ago. And she was trying to make the case that wood that came from a land clearing operation whether it's for a housing development or solar or whatever, should not be accepted by forest products companies. And that by doing that, we were essentially encouraging the clearing of the land, which of course, we didn't make the decision to clear the land, but somebody else did. And it all arose over about 180 acre solar panel project just to the east of Washington, D.C. And they lost all wood, so it all got logged, or it's in the process of being logged. And, what do you do? I mean, we just as soon as stay in forest, but it's going to be converted, and there's nothing that we have to do with that. But I thought it's sort of ironic that, first of all, the environmental community spent a lot of time incentivizing solar energy. They just think it's wonderful. And then they turn around and beat you over the head with it because you're accepting the logs that came from their project.
All right, anybody else with any more legislative updates? Okay. So the third prepared question is, what action or support is needed from loggers? So obviously, time is a precious commodity, but if a logger has a few minutes to contribute to the benefit of his profession, is there anything going on in your state that would benefit from some logger participation? Let's see here, who hasn't gone first yet? Let's go with maybe Ohio first.
I think from the standpoint of logger involvement, one thing I think we need to do a better job of is getting out and educating just the general public on why we do what we do and the right way to do what we do. I mean, that's something as especially coming from our program with our master logger program and our training. There's a lot of operators out there that don't go through the training and do the things that we do to be a part of that. They don't pay into the insurance programs. They don't try to do things from a silviculture standpoint that's productive for the forest for the future moving forward. And I think sometimes we all get lumped in together, and they don't understand that there's factions of us out there that try to do things from an environmental standpoint that is going to keep this a renewable resource for many years to come, and a lot of cases we do things that make the forest more viable and flourish instead of just the opinion is we're destroying it when we're cutting trees, and I think we need to do a better job of changing that perception.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that I've not seen too many loggers who are excited to jump in front of a camera to talk about what they do or get out and speak in a public platform. The industry tends to be a little shyer when it comes to telling their story. And I think that, like Ryan said, a huge part of this is the industry side telling their story and being able to show how they are conservationists following BMPs, and they are managing our forest land that's going to capture more carbon due to that management, and just all the ways that it benefits the environment and wildlife and ecosystems. And we do that at an association level, but it requires everyone down to the granular level telling that story together. And I agree absolutely that that's something that I think as an industry across the country, we probably struggle with, and is something that we hope to be working on.
Great, thank you. Let's go to Maryland.
We have our loggers are pretty well engaged, particularly the mountain loggers group over in the hardwood area in Western Maryland, and they do a tremendous job of supporting their local community. They're big donors to the Children's Hospital there in Morgantown, and they're very well respected, I think. In my own area, I'm over here in the Southern Pine area on the Eastern Shore. Not quite as good, although we are planning a Logger Appreciation Day to celebrate our Maryland Logger of the Year who comes from the Eastern Shore. That'll be in May. So we're gonna make some efforts to get the loggers over here a little bit more engaged and get them included in our educational efforts.
Great, thank you. We'll maybe let Frank go and then finish with West Virginia. They haven't gone last yet.
Our saying in Virginia is we stayed in the woods too long. And we have found through our work in the last couple of years that most of our legislators, that's the first question they ask when you meet with them. Well, who's in my district? Who do you have here today that's in my district? And, that's really, really gotten to be important to these people. And year before last, we got the General Assembly to pass a personal property exemption for logging equipment, just like the farmers have in Virginia, but it was left up to the counties. And we find it so true there. I mean, sometimes we don't even have a logger show up to protect their own, to save their own money in their own county. And it's amazing to me. We've been so successful in some counties where we have people that are active and come to meetings and speak to the legislators and speak to the Board of Supervisors. And then you go to other counties and, it's like nobody cares. And you have to come. And this year in Virginia, we're going to tackle biomass. We may get destroyed and we may get beat, but we're going to try. It's really important to our loggers. A lot of people have invested heavily in chippers and we think we're environmentalists. We think we're the original green energy, and we're gonna see what we can do. And we need all our members to participate, and I think they will when it all comes down. It's getting better every year. So.
Great, thanks. And then I will go ahead and turn it over to West Virginia to speak last for this portion of the program.
Well, it's a little bit like Frank was just talking about there. Back some of years ago, I was that person that complained about everything, but didn't go and try to do something about it. And my thought was, one person, how do I change anything? Loggers are a different breed of people. I'll admit that. They stick to themselves. They don't really like to get their business part of it out in the public, but they're learning all the time. And here in West Virginia, I think we're starting to get across to some of them about how important it is to be in the limelight, to be in the public, to be at these legislative sessions, meetings. We have a legislative reception. As Eric said a while ago, we're becoming the largest entity in the state of West Virginia. And I never understood why coal got everything they got, but that's because they were the largest entity in the state of West Virginia. They carried the votes. I think that's where we're going to be at, but it's something, if you want to get something, you have to work for it. They're not going to give it to you just because you want it. You have to make an effort. You have to work for it. And that's what we got to work towards. Not all I have.
I'll add a little bit to that. One of the best things that happened, I think, in the last year in terms of public relations and the support the logging industry had in the state, ironically, was the pandemic assistance program. We had 190 companies that were eligible to receive assistance through USDA and did. And in the course of doing that, I have talked with every single USDA office where they came in and the leadership within USDA. They had no idea the quality of the work, the quality of the bookkeeping that was done by the loggers compared to the normal farmers that they deal with, the genuine respect that they had for these folks, and the size of these businesses, the capital they go through every day compared to the farmers in West Virginia. And so I look at that as we've got a cadre of what I call interlockers out there that now really, they interact with other people all the time, and they're going to share that information that they've learned with others to help build in their own communities. Joe mentioned the mountain loggers, and Bill's a member of that group, and probably a founding member, if I'm probably not mistaken, probably one of the early adopters. But they do a terrific job of investing in needs in the community, social needs in the community, not business needs, not other people's needs, and they don't do it because they want respect. They do it because they know it's the right thing to do. It's in their heart to do it. And I think it's an inspiring thing to go to their meetings and listen to the stories of people, because it's a genuine relationship they have with their communities. And I think that's the value of the loggers in a community, is that people know them. When I speak to legislators, and West Virginia is very different, outside of our Eastern Panhandle and a couple of our larger cities, almost every legislator has somebody in their family that was in the wood business of some sort. They will tell you, oh, my grandfather was a logger, my uncle was a logger, my dad worked in a sawmill. We have a great history here, and I've tried to tap into that, so that they understand that it's an industry that's changed, and it's constantly changing, and it begins that conversation about what the challenges are, just how we began this evening. What are the challenges? If you can relate to a legislator, somebody that they loved and cared about, and to say that business they're in is no longer that same business, but now here's the challenges we have today, I think it really helps us a long ways of getting to be listened to. And that's all we really want. If we get listened to, then we can move ahead. If we don't get listened to and get discounted, we're not going to make progress. But I think that I always say it, we always try to use these analogies of various things, but you do have to have that presence in the community. And you don't need to go out, as Bill said, sometimes you don't want to go out and speak out, but when you do, sometimes you might find out you're a pretty good public speaker. Bill spoke at a public hearing and was a terrific public speaker. And in fact, as you see him tonight there with the suspenders on, the slick lawyers thought that we had dressed him up. They didn't think a logger was that articulate. So, I don't want to make fun of that or bring Bill up, but it was a great example that we have a message, you're passionate about it, people believe, I've been dealing with legislative affairs for decades, and passion trumps message every single time. When you're in the business and they understand that you're concerned, when you're mad because you're frustrated, they get it. And I think that's part of it, is you just need to explain to folks what the needs are. But I think one of the things that's best for, I think, the future is just being invested in your community. And I think, if we have other groups like the mountain loggers, I'd love to see more of those. I'll give you one more example. We had a logger, sadly, one of our real skilled hand tool loggers in southern West Virginia got killed. He had what was considered to be one of the best crews around. Everybody wanted him to do their handwork because he was so fast and so efficient and so safe. Well, he got killed in a very freak accident, as we all know, and we've probably had that happen. The entire community, he had no outside the assets that he owned, he didn't have workers' comp or any payment for that. But the logging community came out, had a log sale, raised an enormous amount of money to help the children and the family to get through their troubled times. And it was a great example of folks just gathering up, and businesses, the sawmills, the log buyers all donated materials, so that this was a very, very successful fundraiser for that family, so that these kids would have at least a future that they would have had if their father had been around. So I think it's something that we don't often sit back and realize. We do have a lot of credibility. A lot of times urban folks talk about street cred. Well, we have a lot of street cred in rural communities. And I don't think we often realize that we don't have to tout it. People see it, they see it every day, they see the results. It's fascinating when I see the television, when the log truck goes up to the Children's Hospital in WVU, and there's another $75,000 check this year from their log-a-load drive. It's pretty impressive, but that's only a a 20-second message on the TV. It's the stuff they see every day in the community and the people helping out. You know, when there's a disaster in the community, loggers are the first to show up with a dozer and a log truck to start plucking trees off the highways long before the highway department gets there. And I think that's something that we don't often realize, that we intuitively, the business that loggers are in really is a community business and has so many assets that's important and very willing to share it. And I think that's something that we often get portrayed in the logging community because of a bad actor. And I think that's one of the benefits we have in West Virginia, is that we do have a license. We have a Logging Control and Sediment Control Act here. Loggers are licensed, they're certified, they have to be trained, they have to apply BMP. BMPs aren't voluntary, gee, I wish you'd do that. They're required in West Virginia. And that helps us weed out some of these characters that would really downgrade the industry. And I think I try to remind my members how really valuable, and tonight was sort of reminded me of the same thing, is that we do have a good regulatory framework in the state, a training framework. We can build it, we can always make it better, but we've got a good start. And I appreciate the opportunity tonight just to listen to all the other states. So thank you.
Thank you. I do want to thank all of our panelists tonight. It's been really interesting for me. I'm a little bit new to the logging. I mean, I worked for the Department of Forestry for many years. I did inspections and things, but a little bit new to logger education, and it's been wonderful to hear more about everything that goes on in all the different states, and to hear from really some of the best loggers out there. We do have a comment I'll read off. While I'm reading the comment, just want to make a note, if anybody has any questions for our panelists, either for an individual panelist, maybe the one for your state, or maybe something that you heard tonight that you want to know more about, or a general question I can put out to whoever wants to answer it, please go ahead and put those either in the chat or the Q&A. Those buttons are at the bottom of your screen and look like cartoon talk bubbles. You can click either one of those and type something in, or you can use the raise hand icon. You probably saw that on both Frank and Joe's screens during the session. That looks like a little raised hand, and I can call on you the way I did them. We have a comment from Anthony here, who says, it was informing to hear from all of the speakers. I appreciate all of your time and efforts in sharing your thoughts this evening. Let's keep the momentum going. So also looking forward to keeping the momentum going with our joint educational program. And I know I heard some folks talking about maybe meeting up in the adjacent corners of their states. And another Virginia Loggers Association is having their annual meeting in Williamsburg this year. The Virginia Forestry Association, they couldn't send a representative tonight, but their summit, which is it's VFA and the Society of American Foresters and a couple other, I think, sponsoring agencies, but that is coming up real soon here next week here in Blacksburg, which we're all very excited about here in the Blacksburg forestry community. So as they're all, all opportunities to get involved in your state. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Don't know if anybody has anything else that they want to say. We'll just give folks a few minutes in case we do get a question.
You know, one of the things we didn't mention about tonight, if I might, are some innovations in logging. Ben Spong, who's our extension folks was on this call, mentioned it a little bit, but we are beginning to see more cabled logging systems in West Virginia. Now we have 3 systems operating in the state. The Forest Service is taking a look at trying to use that as an alternative on public lands to helicopter logging. And so I think we're beginning to see more and more opportunities for, we're still traditionally, the vast majority of our industry in West Virginia are hand tools, and probably for some of these steep slopes, that's going to continue to be used in a lot of varieties. But I think that as we look to the future, I think that's one of the challenges we have, is that how can we have systems that are safer for our loggers, that are more productive, and how do we figure out the business planning? And I think that's my next month's session. The business side of logging is always that's where the rubber meets the road, trying to figure out how you pay the bills for this stuff and get capitalized for those large capital expenditures. So I think that's a good tee that you have in the right series here. This next month that sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think there's some real interesting technology. Again, I'll throw this back to Eric, but we have a new member of the Forestry Association now that's working with truck cameras. And so there's a number of these new technologies that I think logging has maybe been a little less on the forefront of adopting, or looking into in a serious way. And so it's a matter of some of our organizations here to try to get the word out on some of these technologies and opportunities to look at some of these, look at them critically, to see if they are helpful or if there's something that's going to increase your bottom line as the logger, and produce a safe and productive product out of your operation. So I think there's some great opportunities there for us on the training side to figure out ways that we can get that information out to loggers around the states.
Great. And I see that Frank has his hand up again, so we will go to Frank.
We just put cameras on our trucks, front and back. Already had two accidents. One, the guy didn't merge, showed up on camera. He just told my truck to go on. He knew he was at fault. The other one was a really, really bad wreck where a car ran a stop sign. I mean, my truck just hit it right in the passenger door. It was really a good thing wasn't anybody with her. But I can tell you from, y'all a little further north than what we are, but Georgia, South Carolina, they're having a tremendous difficult time trying to get their trucks insured. There's only like 2 carriers right in Georgia now, I think. There's counties down there where people won't even go in because of the lawsuits. Cameras are going to be a big part of that. And, that trend is moving to the north. And I think tort reform is going to be very valuable for all of us in the next few assemblies we have going forward.
And we do have a comment in the chat from Kevin, wishing Agnes good luck in her new position. So for those of you that don't know, Agnes, my counterpart in the Maryland and Delaware logger education realm, has taken a new job in British Columbia. And Agnes is really instrumental in getting this whole MALT webinar thing started. And so she's leaving a legacy, and we do all wish her the best in British Columbia. They're lucky to be getting Agnes. So.
You guys, that's so sweet. Is it faster to say or type?
Speak.
I love loggers. I love my job. I love what I do. And it's going to be sad to go. I feel very privileged to be able to talk to landowners and loggers, because then I can share these messages of caring and loving the land and everybody being a good steward. So I feel very fortunate with the position that I have. So typing would have been better. You might not have heard my cracking voice. So thank you guys. I love you all. Keep up the good work and caring for your states. It's a beautiful thing to see and hear you guys talking. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Agnes. And I don't see any other questions coming through, so we might just end with this. A little tribute to Agnes and to our program. And as we heard, next month, we're going to be talking about the business side of logging, which we touched on a little bit here tonight, the importance of it. So look forward to seeing a lot of you back here next month for that. And other than that, you should be getting your logging training coordinator will be getting your name so that you can get credit for attending the webinar tonight. And you should also be getting a certificate for your records to hold on to for your attendance tonight. But I want to just thank again our wonderful panelists. It's just really remarkable group of people out here doing really good work in the logging community, and really brought a lot to the program this evening. So thank you to each of you, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.